I still remember the rusty gate, the peeling paint, and the stench of damp blankets. I was only 12 when my mother told me this place would be temporary, that she'd come back in a few days, maybe a week at most. I waited. 7 years passed. Back then, I didn't understand what was happening. I thought maybe she needed time. Maybe she had a plan. But now I know better. She didn't leave me there because she had no choice. She left because I was the easiest thing to let go of. That temporary shelter wasn't meant for children. It was a forgotten facility for the elderly, the homeless, and the unwanted. And that's where she left me, with no goodbye, just a half-hearted promise and a bag of my clothes. Now, she's back in that same place, not to take me home, but because she has nowhere else to go. And this time, I'm the one who gets to walk away. Growing up, I wasn't abused. Not physically. There were no bruises, no shouting matches, but I was invisible. My mother, Cecilia, was always busy. Busy working, busy talking to someone else, or busy praising my older sister, Vivian. Vivian was everything I wasn't: elegant, smart, poised. People gravitated toward her like she was some kind of royalty. Teachers loved her. Neighbors complimented her. My mother, she adored her. If Vivian got a B+, it was a sign of potential. If I got an A, I was told, "You're lucky the questions were easy." I wasn't jealous. Not really. Vivian didn't ask to be the favorite. But it's hard not to notice when every birthday party she had was a catered event, while mine was a frozen cake from the clearance bin, if it happened at all. I remember once I drew a picture of our family for school. I spent hours on it. When I showed it to my mom, she glanced at it and said, "Why do you always draw yourself so big?" I didn't know what to say. Maybe I just wanted to be seen. At 12, I had already learned not to expect much. I knew how to pack my own lunch, how to iron my own uniform, and how to disappear when things got tense. But deep down, I still hoped for something more. Maybe, just maybe, if I worked hard enough, if I was quiet enough, she'd notice me the way she noticed Vivian. But things changed quickly after Vivian won a scholarship to study abroad. Suddenly, my mother started talking about a new chapter. About cutting down responsibilities and starting fresh. I didn't understand what any of that meant. Not until she started looking at me differently. Like I was a box she hadn't packed yet. A loose end. One night I overheard her on the phone, whispering, "He's old enough now. I can't keep dragging him along." I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, pretending I didn't hear. The next morning, she made pancakes. My favorite. It felt like an apology before the crime. Looking back, the signs were there. The sudden kindness. The quiet detachment. The way she no longer made plans that included me. I wasn't a bad kid. I didn't skip school, didn't get into fights, and didn't talk back. But I was inconvenient. I was the extra, the forgotten line in the story. And when a mother sees her child as an obligation, the goodbye is never loud. It's silent, strategic, wrapped in smiles and words like temporary. She told me we were going to visit a community center. Just for a few days, she said. A short stay. They've got programs, activities, even a little library, she added, her voice unnaturally cheerful. I didn't ask questions. I just nodded. That was the kind of kid I was. Obedient, careful, quiet. The ride was long, maybe an hour. She didn't play the radio. She didn't talk much either. Every time I looked at her, she had this faraway look, like she wasn't driving towards something, but away from it. I remember watching the trees blur past the window. I kept thinking, why pack my old clothes? Why not just let me stay home? When I didn't dare ask. When we arrived, I stared at the building in silence. It looked nothing like a community center. The sign out front was half faded. The roof sagged. The walls were stained with age and something darker I didn't want to name. A place for the forgotten. That's what it looked like. Inside, it smelled like bleach and boiled vegetables. A woman behind the counter looked startled when she saw me. "We don't usually get children," she said. My mother just smiled and handed her a clipboard. I didn't know it then, but she had already made arrangements. She'd been planning this. I sat in the cracked vinyl chair by the window, holding my backpack, while she filled out the paperwork. My name, my birth date, allergies. I could see her handwriting through the thin paper. Sharp, quick strokes like she couldn't finish fast enough. When she stood up, I thought maybe she'd kneel and hug me. Maybe she'd look me in the eye. But she didn't. She smoothed her skirt, pressed a kiss to my forehead like it was routine, and whispered, "It's just a little break. Be good, okay?" Then she turned and walked out. No wave. No looking back. Just the sound of the door clicking shut behind her. I waited. 10 minutes. 20. An hour. I kept glancing at the door, expecting it to creak open, expecting her to step back in and say it was all a mistake. That she'd changed her mind. But the only one who came was an old man with a cane, who mistook me for someone else. "Your mother is gone too, huh?" he asked, with a crooked smile. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. Instead, I just said, "Yeah, That night, I lay on a cot under a flickering ceiling light. The sheets smelled like medicine and mold. I stared at the ceiling and repeated her words over and over. Just a little break. Just a little break. But even then, something deep inside me already knew. She wasn't coming back. No one ever asked why I was there. Not the staff, not the volunteers, not the other residents. It was as if a 12-year-old boy showing up at a crumbling shelter for the elderly and displaced was normal. Or maybe they'd seen too much to be surprised anymore. My room, if you could call it that, was a converted storage closet with a cot and a broken lamp. The walls were thin. I could hear Mr. Henry coughing all night in the room next door and someone arguing with the television in the hallway. No one ever turned the volume down. The first few weeks were the hardest. I didn't speak unless spoken to. I flinched at every knock, every footstep, every cough that sounded too close. Meals were quiet and tasteless. Oatmeal in the morning, soup in the evening. Sometimes bread if the donations hadn't run out. But what haunted me more than the cold food or colder stares was the silence from my mother. No letters, no phone calls, not even a message passed along from the staff. At first I made excuses for her in my mind. Maybe she was sick, maybe Vivian needed help, maybe, just maybe, she was working extra hours to bring me home. But as weeks turned to months, those excuses became harder to believe. Every day felt like a repeat of the last. Wake up, sit in group, activity, sessions meant for seniors. Try to read an old magazine in the corner while the others played bingo. One of the nurses tried to include me once by handing me a coloring book. I was 13. I politely declined. The only person who seemed to see me was Mr. Leon. He used to be a teacher. He told me one afternoon when he saw me sketching on a napkin. "You've got steady hands," he said. "That's rare." He began to bring me puzzles, old notebooks, and even a dusty box of computer parts one day. "Have you ever built something before?" he asked. I shook my head. He smiled. "Then it's about time." Leon was the first person who didn't look at me with pity, or worse, indifference. He asked me questions not about my mother or why I was there, but about me. What I liked, what I wondered about, who I wanted to become. It was a strange feeling being seen. The others called me the boy. Some joked that I was a mascot. Others forgot I was even there. But Mr. Leon made space for me. And in that quiet corner of the shelter, between circuits and wires, I started building things. Little things at first, then real things. Things that work. It was the first time I felt like I was building something, when so much of me had already been torn down. I never stopped hoping that my mother would walk through the door one day. But even hope grows tired eventually. It started with a broken radio. One of the shelter's ancient tabletop radios sputtered, then died completely during lunch one day. Most of the residents shrugged it off. Just another thing falling apart in a place where everything already had. But Mr. Leon nudged it toward me. "Think you can fix it?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. I hesitated. "I don't know how." He leaned closer. Neither did I, until I tried. So I took it apart that afternoon, sitting cross-legged on the tile floor with a bent screwdriver and a flashlight that flickered worse than the hallway lights. I poked around the circuits, followed lines like a maze, and Googled schematics on a second-hand phone the shelter let us borrow in emergencies. It took me 3 days. And then, static. Then, music. Leon clapped so loudly he startled half the dining hall. "We've got ourselves a real engineer," he beamed. That moment lit something in me. A flicker of worth. Of ability. Out of control. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't just surviving. I was doing, creating, solving. And it wasn't long before word spread. "He's the kid who fixed the radio," one resident said. "He figured out why the heater keeps cutting out," another added. Eventually, the staff started asking me to look at things. Broken remotes, unplugged lamps, even a busted fax machine they used for paperwork. I didn't fix everything, but I tried. I learned, I failed and tried again. And the more I fixed, the less broken I felt. One of the staff members, Rosa, took notice. She pulled me aside one day, a clipboard in hand. "There's a tech workshop opening up at the Bright Path program. It's for teens like you, displaced but gifted. Are you interested?" I was 16 by then. I'd stopped waiting for my mother. I'd stopped checking the door. I nodded. "Yeah, I think I am." The workshop became my escape. 3 afternoons a week, I'd take the bus into the city and sit in a room filled with wires, tools, and, most importantly, people who believed I wasn't a mistake. They taught me how to code, how to solder, and how to problem solve with logic instead of just instinct. They didn't ask about my past, only what I wanted to build next. That year, I built a simple app to help residents at the shelter request repairs and maintenance more easily. The director loved it. It wasn't much, but it was mine. My name was on it. My work, my skill. And just like that, I had something resembling a future. Mr. Leon printed out my first certificate of completion and framed it with cardboard and duct tape. He handed it to me like it was a degree. "Don't let this be the last one," he said. It wasn't. And though the shelter still creaked and coughed around me, inside me, something had finally started to hum back to life. I left the shelter 2 days after my 19th birthday. No party, no balloons, just a duffel bag with everything I owned, a folder of workshop certificates, and a folded goodbye letter from Mr. Leon that simply said, "Keep building." The outside world felt louder than I remembered. The city moved fast, people brushing past, horns blaring, faces tight with purpose. But I wasn't scared. I'd spent 7 years watching the world through a cracked window. Now, I was finally stepping into it. Through the Bright Path program, I landed a part-time job at a computer repair shop. The pay was awful, but I didn't care. I had a key, a schedule, a reason to wake up that didn't involve bingo or boiled soup. I rented a room the size of a closet with a mattress that felt more like springs than foam. But it was mine. My name was on the mailbox. My food was in the fridge. For once, I didn't have to share toothpaste or listen to anyone snore through the wall. At night, I took online classes in coding and hardware systems. I stayed up late debugging lines of code no one would ever see, drinking dollar coffee and dreaming in variables. The work was slow, but I was patient. I had spent most of my life waiting. What were a few more years? Sometimes I thought of my mother. Not with anger, not even with longing. Just curiosity. Did she ever think of me when she saw a 12-year-old on the street? Did she even regret it? I never looked her up. Never searched for Vivian either. I'd spent too long being defined by people who didn't choose me. Now I was choosing myself. After a year of working and studying, I launched a small freelancing service fixing home networks and old laptops. Clients were scarce at first, but word spread, mostly through kind neighbors and Facebook moms. Before I knew it, I was booked weeks in advance. Then came the moment that shifted everything. One of my clients, an executive at a local education nonprofit, was impressed with how I'd restored an ancient server for their office. She asked about my background, and I told her the short version: abandoned, rebuilt, determined. She didn't flinch. Instead, she asked, "Have you ever thought about teaching what you know?" That question unlocked something I hadn't dared to imagine. I started volunteering once a week, teaching tech literacy at youth shelters and community centers. The first time I walked into a room full of kids and saw their eyes light up as I took apart a motherboard, I felt something deep and quiet settle in my chest. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't validation. It was belonging. I hadn't just survived my mother's decision. I had turned it into a blueprint. And now, I was helping others do the same. The letter came in a plain white envelope with no return address. It was slipped under my door, no stamp, no delivery mark. Just my name, written in type. A careful script I didn't recognize. At first, I thought it was junk. Maybe a flyer or a neighbor's misdelivery. But then I opened it. "To whom it may concern. This is to inform you that Miss Cecilia Dawson has recently been admitted to Willow Pines Community Home." Why? I froze. Willow Pines. That was the shelter. The same shelter. The place I had been left in for 7 years. I hadn't said its name out loud in ages, hadn't even driven past it. Now suddenly, it was in my apartment again, in my hands. I sat on the edge of my bed and read the rest slowly. Cecilia. My mother, ill, without stable housing, placed into Willow Pines through state services after a medical emergency and eviction. They were informing me because, apparently, I was still listed as her next of kin. Next of kin. What a joke. I didn't know how to feel. Part of me wanted to laugh. After all this time, after years of silence, of erasure, she was back. At the very place she discarded me like an old coat. Another part of me just sat there blank. Not angry, not sad, just tired. I hadn't spoken her name in years. I'd built a life without her. A small one, maybe, but mine. One I'd earned, pixel by pixel, screw by screw, hour by late, night hour. And now the ghost of her was pushing open a door I thought I'd sealed shut. I showed the letter to Rosa, the program director at Bright Path. She had become a mentor to me by then, always sharp, always kind. "Do you want to see her?" she asked gently. I didn't answer right away. I thought of all the nights I'd stared at that door, willing her to walk through it. All the birthdays she missed. All the apologies I never got. Then I thought of the kids I was teaching now, the ones whose parents disappeared, or worse, stayed and still made them feel invisible. "I don't know," I finally said, "but I think I need to." 2 days later, I stood at the gates of Willow Pines. The sign was even more faded. The building was exactly the same, though smaller somehow. Older, like time had chewed it slowly from the inside out. My hands were shaking. I hadn't realized until I reached for the buzzer. The receptionist looked up when I gave my name. Her eyes widened, just slightly. "She's awake," she said. "She's been asking if you'd come." I followed her down a hallway that hadn't changed since I was 12. Same cracked linoleum, same bleach-heavy air. When we stopped at room 21B, I hesitated. The last time I was here, I was a boy, begging not to be forgotten. Now I was a man, and she was the one left waiting. She looked smaller than I remembered. Thinner. Fragile almost. Propped up against a pile of thin pillows, with a pale blanket draped over her knees like a shroud. Her gray hair was pulled back in a loose braid. The room smelled of rubbing alcohol and reheated soup. For a moment, I didn't recognize her. But when her eyes met mine, something inside me clenched. "No," she whispered, her voice brittle as old paper. "You came." I stood in the doorway longer than I should have. I didn't move. I didn't speak. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she added, then looked down at her hands. They were shaking. Or maybe it was just the weakness in her body. "I didn't know if you'd still want to see me." I stepped inside slowly. My shoes made soft taps on the linoleum, like the building itself was holding its breath. "You're at Willow Pines," I said finally. She nodded. "The state placed me here after I collapsed. They said I had nowhere else to go." She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Funny, isn't it? This place." "Not really," I said. We sat in silence for a while. I didn't take the chair, I stayed standing. I wanted to see her eyes when I asked what I came to ask. "Why?" She blinked. "Why what, sweetheart?" "Don't call me that," I snapped, too quickly. Then, more quietly, "Why did you leave me here?" She looked away. I was overwhelmed. Vivian had her scholarship, I had debts. Your father. He was never. Stop. My voice was calm but sharp. Don't deflect. Don't make it about Vivian. Or Bill's. Or someone else. She swallowed hard. You left me here and never came back. Not a single call. Not a letter. Nothing. For 7 years, I lived in this place while you what? Lived your new life. Her eyes welled up. I thought I was doing what was best. I didn't know how to raise you on my own. Vivian had opportunities. I had to follow. You had a choice. I interrupted. And you chose her. You chose a future that didn't include me. She didn't deny it. I was 12. I said, my throat tightening. 12. And you handed me off like I was a bill you couldn't pay. Tears slid down her cheeks, but I didn't comfort her. You know what the worst part was? I whispered. It wasn't the loneliness, or the birthdays, or the night terrors. It was wondering every single day what I did wrong. What part of me was so easy to give up? She reached for me, trembling. I never stopped loving you. I stepped back. Then why didn't you fight for me? She broke. Her shoulders shook. She covered her face with her hands and cried, not delicately, but the way people cry when they realize too late what they destroyed. I stood there and watched. I didn't feel vindicated, just hollow. I don't want to die here, she whispered. Alone. Forgotten. I looked around the room. The same cracked ceiling. The same smell of bleach and resignation. Do you remember what you said to me the day you left? I asked. She didn't answer. You said it was just a little break. That you'd come back. I pulled out the small photo I kept in my wallet, creased at the edges. Me, at 12, standing outside this building. The day she left. I placed it on the table next to her. That's what I looked like the last time I saw you, in case you forgot. She looked at the photo, eyes wide. You gave me 7 years in this place, Mom. I leaned in, my voice low but clear. Now you'll stay here too. Her lip trembled. Are you punishing me? No, I said. I'm giving you the life you chose. For both of us. She opened her mouth to speak, but I turned before she could say another word. At the door, I paused. I don't hate you, I said. I don't need to. Hate would mean I still gave you that kind of power. I looked over my shoulder one last time, but I don't forgive you either. And then I walked out. Outside, the air was cooler, lighter. I stood on the curb and looked up at the building that had been both my prison and my forge. I half expected the walls to groan or the wind to whisper some memory back into my ears. But there was only silence. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just breathed. And for the first time, it didn't hurt. I didn't look back. Not when I walked out the front doors. Not when the wind caught my coat. Not even when the sun dipped behind the roofline of Willow Pines, casting the building in that same dim light I used to watch from my cot. I had come full circle. But this time, I wasn't the one left behind. I stopped at a nearby bench, one I used to sit on during my brief escapes from the shelter. I remember tracing the cracks in the wood with my fingers, wondering what kind of person I'd be if I ever got out. Now I knew. I wasn't perfect. I had scars no one could see and memories that still stung if I let them. But I had built a life, earned every piece of it, brick by brick, choice by choice. Some people wait their whole lives for an apology that never comes. I stopped waiting. Instead, I found peace in something else, distance, direction, and dignity. The next day, I mailed a letter to the shelter, not to her but to the staff. I enclosed a check, modest but enough to fix the roof or maybe upgrade the heating. I didn't sign my name with a flourish, just, in honor of the boy who once slept in room 7 Quine. Then I turned my phone off, packed a weekend bag, and drove 3 hours to the coast. It wasn't fancy, just a quiet motel and the sound of waves hitting rocks. But it was mine. I sat on the balcony, watching the tide come in, a cup of coffee warming my hands. And I thought, she left me where no child should ever be left. And years later, life brought her back to the same place, not out of fate, out of consequence. I didn't have to avenge anything. The world had already answered. I took one final breath and whispered to no one in particular, I'm not the one who needs saving anymore. And then I leaned back and let the ocean drown the silence for me.